Can the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes beat the prequel curse? What will the internet say? So I don't normally review books on this channel. Normally I talk about a lot of TV shows, occasionally movies, but this is the first book I've reviewed, and I have to say the main reason I'm doing it is because I feel like this is like one of the few books that we're probably all going to read at the same time. I feel like for the most part, whenever I read a book that I like, I'm way behind the curve. So it's been a long time since I have read a book by Suzanne Collins. The last time a Hunger Games book came out was 2010. And I remember people saying back then that her prose was just serviceable at best. And I remember thinking, that's not true. She's a great writer. Times have changed. But anyway, before I get into my thoughts on The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes with spoilers and maybe some thoughts on how I think this might go as a movie adaptation, maybe some casting suggestions and other aspects I think that they might have to adapt. Without spoilers, I'm going to seek to avoid spoilers, although I don't consider it a spoiler that there are literal and metaphorical snakes in this book. So, you know, my view of spoilers might be slightly different than yours, so keep that in mind. But I'm going to endeavor to do this without spoilers. But before I get into my thoughts, if you're new to the channel and if you're interested in seeing more reviews like this one, please consider subscribing. So getting into The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So when the internet found out about this book, they were like, yay, a Hunger Games prequel, we're so excited. And then they found out that it was going to be about Coriolanus Snow, and they were all like, but I have to say, I feel like Snow is a brilliant main character. I always thought that he was one of the most underrated characters in the original series. Now, for context, I loved this series when it came out. I still really enjoy the movies. I think time has made me see some of their shortcomings a little bit more clearly, but I still have a place in my heart for them. I even really enjoyed Mockingjay, for context. So if you hated Mockingjay, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But this book, for my money, is perfectly in line with what Suzanne Collins did in the original series. And I feel like using Coriolanus Snow as a main character, it's an interesting counterpoint to Katniss's self-interest, because you could always kind of see how Katniss was tentatively the heroine, but she had a lot of selfishness and just realistic behavior that you don't typically see in, you know, her other young adult compatriots such as Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. In this book, you know, Collins always grappled with a lot of young adult tropes, but she was also very interested in political themes. She was far more political than Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Twilight, or a lot of her other contemporary young adult writers were. And she's gone even more political this time. Now, I don't actually see any parallels between Coriolanus Snow and the current president of the United States. So if that triggers you, don't be worried about that. She doesn't go there at all. But she does make a lot of excellent points, I feel, about living in a society and what it means when you're part of a society that is preserving order to some extent, but it's not really looking after the interests of everyone. And it's, in fact, allowing a lot of people to be oppressed. And it also has a lot going into the nature versus nurture debate. Like, you have to question why Snow ends up the way he does. And she doesn't at all mitigate it. Like, she doesn't say, oh, he was the victim of tragic circumstances, or oh, he was manipulated, or oh, any of those things. She doesn't excuse Coriolanus at all. So the title of this book to me seems to be referring to the two main characters. We have, obviously, Coriolanus Snow, who is the songbird. No, I'm just kidding. He's the snake. And we have another character, a new character, Lucy Baird, who's a tribute from District 12, and the lost love of Coriolanus Snow that we never knew about. And really, Collins does a very, very good job of avoiding a lot of the pitfalls that most prequels can fall into. I think she avoids making this depend too heavily on your knowledge of the Hunger Games trilogy. Now, I don't think you would really want to read this if you hadn't read the Hunger Games trilogy already, but I feel like you could if you really, really wanted to. I feel like it does stand alone as a story. And I think that Lucy Baird, Lucy Gray Baird, the character, is a very interesting character, and she's a lot different than Katniss Everdeen. I think she's a lot more lively, a lot more playing to the audience than Katniss ever was. And there are obviously similarities between this story and particularly the first Hunger Games novel, but I felt overall it managed to chart its own course and to tell enough of a new story that it was well worth the read. Not that it was without flaws. I feel that the structure of the story was problematic because it was a 500-page book. Most of the first 3 books were like 350, and this book, right at around page 357, had a point where it could have ended, I felt, but then I feel that Collins was like, well, do I want to write a sequel or not? And she decided she didn't want to write a sequel, so she wrote like a 150-page epilogue, which kind of, I don't know how they're going to deal with it when they make the film, because I don't think that the last 150 pages of this are particularly cinematic, and I feel like it's pretty slow compared to the rest of the book. But the first 350 pages are very, very, they are all the things that Suzanne Collins' Hunger Games trilogy was at its best. It's very, very tense, exciting, hard to put down, more sophisticated than the original trilogy, but also still has that immediacy, has all the character development and the plot and the exciting cliffhangers and propulsive storytelling that made these books bestsellers to begin with. As I said, I've come around to the fact that she's not a great writer when it comes to prose. In fact, her prose is downright terrible. But I think that she's still a good storyteller because she is able to tell this compelling story that appeals to such a broad audience. So as far as a film goes, I would like to see them cast Snow as an unknown actor, but if they were going to cast an actor to play Snow, I would try to replicate kind of the talented Mr. Ripley, what that pulled off with Matt Damon, and cast someone that people have associations with that are not entirely negative. Because a big thing about Snow's character in this book is that everybody believes him. Like, people think he's trustworthy. People think that he's heroic. So to cast someone like, I'm just giving a wild example, and I have no idea if he would be a good casting choice or not, but Tom Holland, for instance, I think that would really surprise people. A more typical casting choice, I feel like, would be like Cody Smith-McPhee, or an actor like him who's kind of not all of that charismatic, but just a very talented young actor of the right age who could play the part. Or, obviously I feel like Defending Jacob is on right now. I feel like Jaden Martell potentially could do a good job in this role. But those are just some wild suggestions, and as I said, I would rather them pick someone relatively unknown and let the role define the actor rather than the actor define the role. I would like to see them cast some really prestigious actors like Toni Collette or potentially Gary Oldman in this film. It's going to be interesting. I feel like the ending of this is a lot more dark and horrible than the original Hunger Games trilogy. There is at least some hope there, whereas this is kind of a hopeless ending, somewhat analogous to the way the original Star Wars prequels end. But we'll see what they go with. I feel like they're going to really have to cut the last 150 pages of this short to make it a good movie, because I just think it's too long and there's not enough happening, and it really slows down the pace. And I would also, there's something left kind of ambiguous at the ending of this story that I would actually make less ambiguous and make more hopeful if I was making the movie adaptation. Because I just don't think moviegoers can handle a sour ending, and I feel like this has kind of a sour, horrible ending, and that's where the casting of Lucy Baird is going to be really important. I feel like she's going to be the one who comes out of this as the next Jennifer Lawrence, potentially. I don't think that the person who plays Coriolanus Snow is necessarily going to be a big star, but I think the person who plays Lucy Baird could be if they cast a very, very charismatic actor. And I would definitely look for someone like an Emma Stone or a Jennifer Lawrence, someone really charismatic with movie star quality that nobody has any familiarity with yet. So that's probably going to be a tough sell for them, but I would literally have thousands of people interview and just pick the right actors for both these roles. So those are my thoughts on the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, but let me know what you thought in the comments section, and let me know if you have casting ideas for this, and how you would deal with the last 150 pages. Let me know if you didn't think it was boring and if you would just take it pretty literally. So that's my review of The Tale of Songbirds and Snakes, and as always, you can watch more videos right now.